I never thought much about my lawn until Callum started taking care of it. Before him, I'd let it grow wild for weeks, then hack at it myself with a rusty mower that probably should have been retired a decade ago. But after my knee surgery last spring, my neighbor Mrs. Chen insisted I hire someone. She knew a guy, she said. Reliable, good rates, shows up on time. The first morning Callum arrived, I was standing in my kitchen in boxers and an old college t-shirt, making terrible instant coffee and staring out the window at 7:30 in the morning. I heard the truck pull up, then watched him climb out. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s to my 34. Broad shoulders, sun-weathered skin, dark hair pulled back in a small knot at the base of his skull. He wore work boots and cargo pants with grass stains already on them from previous jobs, and when he stretched before unloading his equipment, I noticed the way his gray t-shirt rode up slightly, revealing a strip of tanned stomach. I turned away from the window, feeling ridiculous. I was a high school English teacher on summer break, recovering from surgery, standing in my underwear and objectifying my lawn guy like some cliché. I poured my terrible coffee and tried to focus on the novel I'd been reading, but the sound of the mower starting up kept pulling my attention back to the window. He worked methodically, with a kind of practiced grace. There was something meditative about watching him move through the yard in careful lines, the morning sun catching the sweat on his forearms. When he finished the mowing and moved on to edging, I realized I'd been watching for nearly an hour and hadn't turned a single page. This became my Thursday morning routine. Callum came every week, always at 7:30, always with that same focused efficiency. I'd watch from the window while pretending to read or grade papers, and he'd work for about 90 minutes, then pack up and leave. We never spoke beyond a brief wave if our eyes happened to meet. I told myself I was just appreciating good work ethic, that I was simply glad to have a well-maintained lawn for the first time in years. Then, one Thursday in late June, everything changed. I was in the kitchen as usual when I heard his truck pull up, but this time, when he got out, he was carrying 2 coffee cups, the disposable kind from the good coffee place downtown, not the gas station. I watched, confused, as he walked up to my porch and knocked on the door. My heart started doing something stupid in my chest. I looked down at myself. At least I was wearing actual clothes today, basketball shorts and a faded band t-shirt. I ran a hand through my hair, which probably made it worse, then opened the door. Up close, Callum was even more striking. He had these light brown eyes, almost amber in the morning sun, and a small scar through his left eyebrow that gave him a slightly roguish look. He smiled, and I noticed the crinkles at the corners of his eyes. "Morning," he said, his voice deeper than I'd imagined. "I'm Callum. I know we've never actually met properly, which is weird since I've been coming here for months. Anyway, I grabbed an extra coffee. Wasn't sure how you take it, so I got it with just a little cream. Hope that's okay." He held out one of the cups. I took it, our fingers brushing briefly. "I'm Owen," I managed to say, "and that's actually perfect, thank you. You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said, still smiling. "I wanted to." He gestured to the porch swing. "Mind if I drink mine here? I've got 15 minutes before I need to start, and your porch has the best view on the street." What was I supposed to say? "No?" I nodded, probably too eagerly, and he settled onto the swing while I leaned against the porch railing, both of us sipping our coffee in a silence that felt less awkward than it should have. "You're a teacher, right?" Callum asked after a moment. "Mrs. Chen mentioned it." "English? High school? You a student of Mrs. Chen's gossip network?" He laughed, a warm sound that seemed to ease something tight in my chest. "Everyone on this street is. She's got a whole intelligence operation going. She also told me you're reading Middlemarch for the 3rd time. You make terrible coffee, and you've been recovering from knee surgery." Wow, that's thorough. I took another sip, grateful for something to do with my hands. "What else did she tell you?" "That you're single, keep to yourself too much, and could use a friend." His eyes met mine over the rim of his cup. "She worries about you." I felt heat creep up my neck. "Mrs. Chen needs a hobby." "I think you are her hobby," Callum said, but his tone was gentle, not mocking. "For what it's worth, Middlemarch is a great book. I read it in college. The whole thing about finding connection in ordinary life really stayed with me." I stared at him. "You read George Eliot?" "English major," he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. Graduated 6 years ago. The lawn care business is actually my brother's. I'm just helping out while I figure some things out, or maybe while I avoid figuring things out. Haven't decided which yet. There was something vulnerable in that admission, something that made him feel suddenly more real, more three-dimensional than the fantasy I'd been watching through my window. We talked for the full 15 minutes, and then he finished his coffee, stood up, and said, "Better get to work. Same time next week?" "For the lawn?" I asked stupidly. "For the coffee," he clarified, that smile appearing again. "The lawn's a given, but I'd like to do this again, if you want." I wanted. God, I wanted so much it scared me. The next Thursday, he brought coffee again. And the Thursday after that. It became our ritual. We'd sit on the porch for 15 minutes before he worked, talking about books and music and the small observations that make up a life. I learned he'd been engaged to a woman named Sarah 3 years ago, that she'd called it off 2 months before the wedding after he'd finally admitted something he'd been trying not to admit for years. I learned he was still figuring out what it meant to be openly gay at 29, still navigating the space between who he'd tried to be and who he actually was. It's strange, he said one morning in mid-July, the air already thick with humidity. I spent so long trying to fit into this straight narrative, trying to convince myself that what I felt for Sarah was enough. And it was something, you know? I did care about her. But it wasn't the right thing. And now I'm here, and I see you standing in your kitchen window every Thursday morning, and I think maybe I'm finally feeling the right thing. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. "You knew I was watching?" "Owen," he said my name softly, like it meant something. "I've known since week 2. Why do you think I started stretching right in front of your window?" I laughed, startled and embarrassed and thrilled all at once. I thought I was being subtle. "You were adorable," he said, and then his expression shifted, became more serious. "But I didn't want to assume, didn't want to push. Mrs. Chen mentioned you were gay, but she also said you'd been hurt before, that you'd been with someone for 5 years who left you for someone else, someone less complicated," she said. Marcus. The name still tasted bitter. He wanted someone who was out and proud and went to rallies and pride parades, someone who made being gay their whole personality. And I'm just a high school teacher who likes quiet evenings and classic literature. I wasn't enough spectacle for him. Callum set his empty cup down on the porch boards. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Which part?" "All of it. The idea that there's a right way to be gay, that you have to perform it a certain way to count, that quiet people are less valid than loud ones." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I spent years trying to perform straightness. It was exhausting. I'm not interested in performing anything anymore. I'm interested in real things, in honest things." "Like what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Like the way you smile when you talk about your students. Like the fact that you've read Middlemarch 3 times because you think most people miss the point on the first 2 reads. Like how you stand in your window every Thursday morning, and even though you're trying to be subtle, I can feel you watching, and it makes me want to do my best work." He paused. "Like how right now you're looking at me like you want to kiss me, but you're afraid it'll ruin everything." He wasn't wrong. I was terrified. This thing between us felt fragile, precious, the kind of thing that could shatter with one wrong move. "What if it does ruin everything?" I asked. "Then we'll have ruined something beautiful by trying to make it more beautiful," Callum said. "Isn't that better than never trying at all?" I set my own cup down, crossed the small distance between us. His hand came up to cup the side of my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone, and when I kissed him, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like something I'd been moving toward since that first morning I'd seen him stretch in my yard. His lips were soft, tasting of coffee and something sweeter, and when we finally pulled apart, he was smiling. "I should probably do your lawn now," he murmured. "Probably," I agreed, but neither of us moved. Eventually, he did work, but when he finished, instead of leaving, he came back to the porch. "What are you doing tonight?" he asked. "I was planning to reread Middlemarch." "Fourth time's the charm?" "Something like that." He grinned. "What if we read it together? I could pick up dinner, come back around 7. We could sit on your porch, eat takeout, and take turns reading chapters aloud. Unless that's too much too soon. It probably was, but I didn't care. That sounds perfect. He came back at 7 with Thai food and a battered paperback copy of Middlemarch that he'd clearly read multiple times. We ate pad thai and drunken noodles on my porch as the summer evening cooled around us, and then he read the first chapter in that deep voice of his while I sat next to him on the swing, our shoulders touching. When he finished, he handed me the book, and I read the next chapter. We went back and forth like that for 2 hours until the fireflies came out and the streetlights flickered on. I should go, he said finally, reluctantly. You could stay, I offered, then immediately felt my face heat. I mean, we could keep reading, or watch something. I'm not suggesting— I know what you're suggesting, he said gently, and I want to. But I also want to do this right. I want to take you on actual dates. I want to learn all the small things about you, not just rush to the end because it feels good. He was right. We both knew it. But when he kissed me goodnight on my porch, soft and lingering, it took everything in me not to pull him back inside. We fell into a new rhythm after that. Thursdays remained our coffee mornings, but he started coming back in the evenings too. Sometimes we'd go out, to dinner or a movie, or just for walks around the neighborhood. Other times we'd stay in, cooking together in my small kitchen, or reading on the porch, or watching old movies on my couch, gradually sitting closer and closer until we were tangled together, his arm around my shoulders, my head against his chest. He met my friends. I met his brother and his parents, who welcomed me with a warmth that made my throat tight. His mother hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for making him smile like that." His father shook my hand and said, "He's been different since he met you. Lighter." Summer turned to fall. I went back to teaching, and Callum transitioned his brother's business to cold season services, doing fall cleanups and eventually snow removal. But Thursday mornings remained sacred. He still brought 2 coffees, still sat on my porch for those 15 minutes before work, and we'd talk about our weeks, our hopes, the small beauties we'd noticed. One Thursday in late October, after he'd finished raking leaves, he came back to the porch and said, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," I teased, but my heart was racing. "I spend most nights here anyway. More than half my clothes are in your closet, my toothbrush is in your bathroom. I wake up in your bed more often than my own." He took my hand. "What if I just stayed? What if we stopped pretending I live somewhere else?" I thought about Marcus, who'd accused me of being too cautious, too afraid of commitment. I thought about all the ways I'd protected myself since then, keeping people at arm's length, never quite letting anyone all the way in. And I thought about Callum, who'd shown up every Thursday for months, who'd brought coffee and patience and his battered copy of Middlemarch, who'd waited for me to be ready. "Yes," I said simply. "Yes, stay." He moved in the following weekend. It was surprisingly easy, probably because he was right about already living there in all the ways that mattered. We made space for his books next to mine, hung his art on the walls, rearranged furniture to accommodate both our lives. Mrs. Chen brought over a casserole and told us she'd known all along this was how it would end up. "You both needed someone who understood that love doesn't have to be loud to be real," she said, patting both our hands. "Sometimes the quietest love is the strongest kind." Now it's been a year since that first coffee. Callum still takes care of the lawn, though now he does it for free, and I make him actual good coffee to drink when he's done. We still read together on the porch when weather permits. We still have Thursday mornings, that small ritual that started everything. Last week, I caught him watching me through the kitchen window while I was grading papers at the table, and when I looked up, he smiled that same smile from our first real conversation. I went outside to where he was trimming the hedges and kissed him, not caring that the neighbors might see, not caring about anything except this man who'd taught me that sometimes the best love stories start with the smallest gestures. A cup of coffee, a moment on a porch, the courage to admit you've been watching, hoping, waiting for something real. "What was that for?" he asked when we pulled apart. "For showing up," I said. "For keeping showing up." He kissed me again, softer this time. "I'll always show up for you, every Thursday, every day, for as long as you'll have me." And standing there in my yard, surrounded by the sound of suburban life, I realized that this was what Middlemarch had been trying to tell me all along, that the most profound connections happen in ordinary places, between ordinary people, in the small moments that we choose to make sacred. That love doesn't need to announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes it just needs 2 coffee cups, a porch swing, and the willingness to be seen. Total_char_count, 16,847.